What would you do if you spent months rebuilding a helicopter with your own hands, only for the company to refuse to pay you? In today's incredible story, a hard-working single father risks everything to restore an aircraft everyone else had given up on. But when the company betrays him, something unbelievable happens. Every pilot refuses to fly the helicopter. What happens next is a powerful story of integrity, justice, and the value of honest work. If you enjoy emotional and inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories every week. Now grab your favorite drink, sit back, relax, and let's get started. Jack Turner was 38 years old and lived just outside Fort Worth, Texas, with his 8-year-old son, Ethan. Their small house sat beside a quiet country road, only a few miles from the modest aircraft repair hangar Jack had built with his own hands years earlier. Since losing his wife in a car accident 4 years before, Jack had devoted every moment of his life to raising Ethan. Every morning began the same way. He prepared breakfast, packed Ethan's lunch, walked him to the school bus, and then drove to the hangar before sunrise. No matter how difficult life became, Jack promised himself that his son would always know what determination, honesty, and hard work looked like. Jack had spent nearly 2 decades working as one of the most respected helicopter mechanics in Texas. He specialized in repairing rescue, utility, and commercial helicopters, earning a reputation for never cutting corners. Pilots trusted him because they knew he treated every repair as if his own family would be flying inside the aircraft. To Jack, aviation maintenance wasn't simply a job, it was a responsibility that carried lives in every decision he made. A loose bolt, a rushed inspection, or a missed crack could cost innocent people everything. That belief guided every hour he spent inside the hangar, surrounded by tools, engines, and the smell of aviation fuel. For the past 11 years, Jack had worked for one of the largest helicopter maintenance companies in the state. The company handled contracts for emergency medical helicopters, private aviation firms, and industrial transport operators. Jack rarely sought recognition because seeing aircraft leave the hangar safely meant more to him than awards or promotions. Younger mechanics often asked him for advice, and he patiently explained every repair step until they understood. Many called him the best technician in the company. Unfortunately, while pilots valued experience, the executives upstairs cared more about reducing costs than protecting skilled workers who had built the company's reputation over many years. Everything changed when a new leadership team arrived. The company's executives announced a plan to increase profits by outsourcing portions of maintenance work and reducing payroll expenses. Experienced mechanics worried immediately because they understood that quality repairs required knowledge, patience, and accountability, not simply lower labor costs. Jack attended several meetings where managers assured employees that safety would never be compromised. Still, rumors of layoffs spread through every department. Instead of complaining, Jack continued focusing on his work. He believed aircraft deserved the same careful attention regardless of what happened inside corporate offices. His loyalty remained with the people who trusted the machines he repaired every single day. Late one Friday afternoon, every mechanic received an email requesting attendance at an emergency meeting. Inside the conference room, senior managers explained that restructuring required eliminating several positions immediately. Jack's name appeared on the list. 11 years of dedicated service ended with a handshake, a severance package, and instructions to return his company identification badge before leaving. Jack accepted the news without raising his voice. He quietly packed family photographs, maintenance manuals, and the small model helicopter Ethan had built for him. As he walked through the hangar one final time, several co-workers shook his hand, thanking him for everything he had taught them throughout the years. Driving home that evening felt harder than any repair Jack had ever completed. He wondered how he would pay the mortgage, buy groceries, and continue supporting Ethan. Yet when he arrived home, he forced himself to smile because his son ran outside carrying a school project about helicopters. Ethan proudly explained how he wanted to become a pilot someday. Jack listened carefully, congratulated him on the project, and never mentioned losing his job. After Ethan fell asleep that night, Jack sat alone at the kitchen table reviewing bills and searching online for mechanic positions. Every application seemed to attract dozens of experienced candidates facing the same uncertain future. Several days later, Jack received an unexpected phone call from his former company. One of the managers explained they had an old military rescue helicopter sitting unused behind the maintenance facility. The aircraft had suffered years of neglect and extensive mechanical damage. Since the company no longer wanted to invest in restoring it, they planned to scrap the helicopter. However, transporting it to a recycling yard would cost money. Instead, they offered to deliver it to Jack's independent repair hangar. They casually suggested that if he somehow restored it, they might consider discussing payment after inspecting the completed aircraft. Desperate for work, Jack reluctantly accepted the opportunity. When the helicopter finally arrived, even experienced mechanics from neighboring shops stopped to stare at its condition. Rust covered several exterior panels. Hydraulic systems leaked badly. The rotor assembly showed severe wear, wiring had deteriorated, and the engine had not started in years. Many people believed restoring it would cost far more than the aircraft could ever be worth. Ethan quietly walked around the helicopter with wide eyes before asking, "Can you really fix it, Dad?" Jack smiled gently and placed a hand on the damaged fuselage. "Every machine deserves one honest chance," he replied. "We'll find out together." The following weeks became the hardest Jack had experienced in years. Every morning after taking Ethan to school, he spent 12 to 14 hours inside the hangar, carefully disassembling the helicopter. He inspected every bolt, bearing, hydraulic line, gearbox, and electrical connection with remarkable patience. Whenever he discovered damaged components beyond repair, he searched aviation suppliers across the country for replacement parts he could still afford. Many evenings, he skipped dinner because purchasing another critical component mattered more than buying restaurant meals. Ethan often completed homework at a small workbench nearby, proudly handing his father clean tools whenever he needed them. Together, they slowly watched the neglected helicopter begin returning to life. Money quickly became another serious challenge. Jack invested nearly all of his remaining savings into specialized aviation parts, certified hardware, and safety inspections. Friends questioned whether he was making a terrible financial mistake. Some advised him to abandon the project before losing everything. Jack appreciated their concern, but refused to compromise. He understood that repairing aircraft required complete commitment. Half-finished work could never be considered safe. Every repair had to meet strict aviation standards, regardless of who ultimately owned the helicopter. He reminded himself that his reputation had taken 20 years to build and could disappear forever through one careless decision or one unsafe shortcut. After almost 4 months of relentless work, the helicopter looked completely different. Fresh paint covered the fuselage. The rebuilt engine started smoothly. Every control system functioned perfectly, and extensive ground testing confirmed the aircraft met every required maintenance standard. Jack completed detailed inspection records, signed every repair document under his own certification, and carefully prepared the helicopter for final evaluation. Standing beside the aircraft, Ethan smiled proudly and whispered, "I knew you could save it." Jack looked at the shining helicopter and felt something he hadn't experienced since losing his job: hope. He believed his former company would recognize the quality of his work and honor their promise. Unfortunately, he had no idea that his greatest challenge was still waiting just beyond the hangar doors. A week after completing the restoration, representatives from Jack's former company arrived at his hangar to inspect the helicopter. 3 senior maintenance managers slowly walked around the aircraft, examining every panel, checking the engine compartment, reviewing the hydraulic systems, and comparing Jack's maintenance records with the original repair requirements. They struggled to hide their surprise. The helicopter looked almost brand new. One manager quietly admitted he had never expected such an incredible transformation. Jack remained calm, answering every technical question with confidence and showing detailed documentation for every repaired component. By the end of the inspection, no one could find a single mechanical fault. Jack expected the meeting to end, with payment for months of difficult work. Instead, the senior manager closed the inspection file and explained that the company had decided not to pay him. According to their legal department, there had never been a formal written contract guaranteeing compensation. They claimed the helicopter had been delivered only for evaluation and experimentation. Jack stood silently, unable to believe what he was hearing. He reminded them of the conversations promising payment after successful completion, but the managers simply apologized and prepared to leave. Without another word, they arranged for the helicopter to be transported back to the company's maintenance facility, leaving Jack shocked and deeply disappointed. After the trucks disappeared down the highway carrying the helicopter away, Jack returned to the empty hangar. Every corner reminded him of the months he had spent rebuilding the aircraft. Countless late nights, endless hours of labor, and nearly all of his savings had gone into a project that now belonged to someone else. Ethan quietly walked over and hugged his father without saying anything. Jack smiled gently despite the pain he felt inside. "We'll be all right," he whispered. "No one can take away what we know or the work we did." Although he had lost the payment he desperately needed, he refused to let bitterness change the values he wanted his son to learn. Several days later, the company proudly announced that the restored helicopter would soon return to active service. Press releases praised the organization's maintenance department for successfully bringing an aging rescue aircraft back into operation. Jack's name was never mentioned. Friends began calling him after reading the news, asking whether he had finally been paid. Jack simply replied that he wished the pilot safe flights and hoped the helicopter would continue serving people in need. Even after everything that had happened, he cared more about aviation safety than about receiving public recognition. That attitude earned him even greater respect among mechanics throughout Texas. Before the helicopter could resume operations, company pilots performed their normal pre-flight review of maintenance documents. One experienced captain carefully examined the thick inspection binder and immediately noticed something unusual. Every repair record, structural inspection, engine overhaul certification, and final maintenance approval carried a single signature: Jack Turner. Curious, the captain asked why the company's own mechanics had not signed the restoration paperwork. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Eventually, another employee quietly admitted that the helicopter had actually been rebuilt by a former mechanic working independently after being laid off. The pilots immediately began asking difficult questions. As more details became known, the pilots learned that Jack had restored the helicopter using his own money after being promised payment, only to have the company refuse compensation once the work was finished. None of the pilots questioned Jack's technical ability. In fact, many had trusted his repairs for years before he lost his job. Their concern centered on professional accountability. If a company could refuse to stand behind the mechanic who completed such an important restoration, what did that say about its commitment to maintenance ethics? One senior pilot finally spoke for everyone. "Until this situation is resolved fairly," he said, "I won't fly that helicopter." The decision spread rapidly throughout the pilot group. One after another, scheduled flight crews declined assignments involving the restored helicopter. Their refusal wasn't based on fear of Jack's workmanship. They trusted his skill completely. Instead, they believed aviation depended on honesty, transparency, and respect for certified mechanics. Ignoring those principles could damage confidence across the entire industry. Soon, the helicopter remained parked inside the hangar, with no qualified pilot willing to take responsibility for operating it. Flight schedules were cancelled, customer contracts faced delays, and company executives struggled to understand why such a perfectly restored aircraft had suddenly become impossible to use. News of the dispute quickly reached aviation forums, local newspapers, and television stations across Texas. Journalists interviewed experienced mechanics and retired pilots who explained why ethical treatment of maintenance professionals mattered. They emphasized that safe aviation relied upon trust between mechanics, pilots, and operators. If companies failed to respect certified technicians, confidence throughout the system could suffer. Jack never contacted reporters or criticized his former employer publicly. Whenever journalists requested interviews, he simply stated that every mechanic deserved fair treatment and that aviation safety should always remain more important than business disputes. His calm professionalism impressed viewers across the country. Meanwhile, the grounded helicopter became an expensive problem for the company. Each day it remained unused. Emergency service contracts faced disruptions and financial losses continued growing. Investors questioned management decisions, while customers wondered why an aircraft described as fully restored remained parked inside the maintenance hangar. Internal meetings became increasingly tense as executives searched for solutions. Some suggested assigning different pilots, but none agreed to fly. Others considered additional inspections, yet every independent review confirmed the helicopter itself met all required safety standards. The real issue was no longer mechanical. It had become a matter of integrity and trust. One quiet afternoon, as Jack finished repairing a small private helicopter at his independent hangar, a black executive SUV slowly pulled into the parking area. Ethan looked through the office window and noticed an elegantly dressed woman stepping out of the vehicle. Jack immediately recognized her from company meetings years earlier. It was Rachel Morgan, the company's CEO. She wasn't surrounded by lawyers, managers, or security personnel. She had come alone. Carrying a folder in one hand, she walked toward the hangar with a serious expression. Jack realized this unexpected visit could change everything, though he had no idea what she was about to say when she finally reached his workbench. Rachel Morgan paused for a moment before stepping inside Jack's hangar. The smell of machine oil, fresh paint, and aviation fuel filled the air as sunlight poured through the open hangar doors. Jack wiped his hands with a clean shop towel and calmly walked over to greet her. Ethan stood quietly nearby, watching the unexpected visitor with curiosity. Rachel looked around the workshop, noticing neatly organized tools, spotless workbenches, and several customer helicopters waiting for routine maintenance. She immediately understood why local pilots respected Jack so much. Everything inside the hangar reflected discipline, precision, and pride in workmanship. Before saying anything else, Rachel extended her hand and quietly thanked Jack for agreeing to meet with her. For a few moments, neither of them mentioned the helicopter. Rachel admitted that she had spent the previous week reviewing every document related to the restoration project. She had personally read Jack's maintenance records, inspected photographs taken during the rebuild, and spoken with the engineers who examined the aircraft after completion. Every report reached the same conclusion. Jack's work had been exceptional. She also discovered that company managers had verbally promised payment before refusing to honor that commitment. Although the agreement had never been written on paper, Rachel believed the company had failed to act with honesty. She looked directly at Jack and sincerely apologized for the way he had been treated. Jack listened quietly without interrupting. He appreciated the apology, but months of disappointment had taught him to remain cautious. He explained that losing the money had been difficult, yet the greatest pain came from watching years of professional integrity ignored so easily. He had invested nearly all his savings because he trusted the company's word. More importantly, he had rebuilt the helicopter, believing it would safely serve pilots and rescue crews for many years. "Mechanics don't just repair machines," Jack said calmly. "We protect the people who climb into them. That responsibility deserves respect." Rachel nodded silently, realizing she had underestimated the values that guided experienced aviation professionals. Rachel then admitted that the company's decision had created consequences far beyond a financial dispute. Pilots across Texas continued refusing to fly the restored helicopter, not because they questioned Jack's skills, but because they questioned the company's integrity. Several long-term clients had postponed maintenance contracts, and new customers were beginning to choose competing aviation companies instead. Investors were demanding explanations, while employees privately questioned whether management truly valued the people responsible for keeping aircraft safe. Rachel confessed that she had spent years focusing on profit margins and quarterly reports, never imagining that one unfair decision could damage the company's reputation so deeply. After taking a deep breath, Rachel opened the folder she had brought with her. Inside was a detailed agreement prepared by the company's legal department. She offered Jack full payment for the helicopter restoration, reimbursement for every certified part he had purchased with his own money, additional compensation for the months of labor he had invested, and interest covering the delay. She also included a formal written apology signed by the company's executive board. Jack slowly read every page without speaking. Ethan quietly watched his father, sensing that an important moment was unfolding. The offer was generous, but Jack knew money alone could never solve the deeper issue. Jack closed the folder and looked at Rachel thoughtfully. "I'll accept," he said, "but only if something changes." Rachel immediately asked what he meant. Jack explained that every future maintenance project should begin with clear written agreements protecting both mechanics and companies. Skilled technicians should never have to wonder whether their work would be respected after completion. He also suggested creating an independent review committee where experienced mechanics could raise safety concerns without fearing retaliation from management. Rachel listened carefully, taking notes as Jack spoke. The ideas were practical, fair, and focused entirely on improving aviation safety, rather than seeking personal revenge. Rachel smiled for the first time since arriving. She agreed to every condition without hesitation. In addition, she asked Jack to serve as an independent aviation maintenance consultant for the company, helping improve repair standards and mentoring younger mechanics. At first, Jack hesitated. Returning to work with the same company that had treated him unfairly felt difficult to imagine. Rachel quickly clarified that she wasn't asking him to become an employee again. Instead, she wanted the company to learn from someone whose reputation had been built on honesty, patience, and uncompromising safety standards. After discussing it briefly with Ethan, Jack accepted the consulting role. A month later, the company organized a public event at its main aviation facility. Mechanics, pilots, engineers, local officials, and journalists gathered inside the maintenance hangar where the restored helicopter stood ready for service. Rachel stepped onto a small stage and openly acknowledged the company's mistake. She praised Jack's extraordinary craftsmanship and publicly apologized for refusing to honor the original agreement. Then, in front of everyone present, she presented Jack with full compensation and announced the company's new ethical maintenance policies based on the recommendations he had proposed. The crowd responded with loud applause, especially the mechanics who understood exactly what those changes meant for their profession. Following the announcement, the pilots gathered around the helicopter for one final inspection. They carefully reviewed the updated documentation, confirmed the company had accepted full responsibility for the restoration process, and thanked Jack personally for maintaining such high professional standards throughout the dispute. One veteran rescue pilot smiled warmly before climbing into the cockpit. "Now," he said confidently, "I'm proud to fly an aircraft rebuilt by Jack Turner." Minutes later, the helicopter lifted smoothly into the Texas sky while everyone below watched. The successful flight marked far more than the return of a repaired aircraft. It symbolized the restoration of trust between mechanics, pilots, and company leadership. Over the following years, Jack's independent repair business grew into one of the most respected helicopter maintenance facilities in Texas. Pilots traveled from across the country because they trusted his commitment to safety above everything else. Ethan often spent weekends in the hangar, learning the same values his father had practiced throughout his life. Whenever new mechanics joined the team, Jack reminded them that every repaired aircraft carried someone's family, someone's future, and someone's hope. Looking across the busy hangar one evening, he realized the company had once refused to pay him for rebuilding a helicopter, but in the end, integrity had earned him something far greater than money. It had earned lasting respect, restored trust, and a legacy that would inspire the next generation of aviation professionals for many years to come.